He said that I'm a guest preacher. I'm actually part of the family of Creekside. I'm more like your brother-in-law preaching. So, you get what you pay for, which is nothing. I'm going to continue in, Jerry? All right. I'm going to continue in Romans today, and I'm just going to expand on one single verse, Romans 12:2. Before I do that, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Greg Arthur. I'm an engineer. I'm a particular kind of engineer. I'm a sewage engineer. So if any of you have any questions about sewage and the remarkable, wonderful process called sewage treatment, please ask me. I'm not a preacher, an engineer. And I'm also a normal public speaker, meaning I have PowerPoint, I look at it, I have notes. I'm not like those freaks of nature, the Bruces, who can stand up there and talk off the top of their head, just astounding. No one can do that except the Bruces. And in fact, last week, if you saw and heard Jeffrey preach last week, he was awesome. And I think that we're just lucky to have the Bruces around, that's for sure. But today you don't get a Bruce, you get an Arthur, an engineer, a sewage engineer. My qualifications, I'm a believer. I was saved in Jerry Engler's small group 20 years ago. And I have a mouth. I can proclaim what God has done to me. That's my qualifications. My next qualification is that I'm a believer who believes that His Word is true. I've long ago quit being a why Christian. Why is this in the Bible? Why does this apply? Why me? Why should I do this? And I've become a how Christian. This is in the Bible. How do I do that? This is what it says. How does it apply to me? That is my other qualification. I'm a how Christian, not a why Christian anymore. I have a little question for you. You've heard the saying, you are what you eat. Is that correct? Is that the most inane thing you've ever heard in your life? I eat apples. Yesterday I ate enchiladas. I ate tortilla chips at the same place with enchiladas. Anyway, I am not an apple or an enchilada. I stand here to show you that statement is just patently not true. What's probably more close to true is you are what you think. As a man thinks, it says in the Proverbs, as a man thinks, so he acts. And I would say, as a man acts, so he is. I'll give you a little story about this. I was one time riding around in a sewage engineer's truck in Los Angeles, and the guy was older, and I apologize to all of you that have the crown of bald-headedness now, that is a sign of maturity and all that. I apologize because he was bald and he was riding around. I was riding around with him, and I just could not get that out of my head. I was thinking, man, he's bald. He's bald, he's bald, he's bald. And I didn't want to think that, but I was thinking that the whole time. And then at one point, we had been riding around his truck for days. And at one point he was telling a story about how in Southern California, how he used to, when he was young, he used to go surfing a lot. And I just wanted to say to him, I said, I can see you as a young man with your blonde hair flowing behind you. What I said was, I can see you with your blonde hair flowing behind you. Honestly, I said bald. And you are what you think. I couldn't help it. I was thinking that. I was thinking he's bald. I started talking to him, and out it came. I said it, and I did it. I'll give you one other story. It was kind of a great one. I was at the Oakland airport, and I was at the Starbucks, and I wanted a iced tea. They didn't have black iced tea. They had white iced tea, whatever that is. And so I asked, I say, okay, I'll get the white iced tea. Is it any good? And the gal who was behind the counter, she was about 19, and she was getting it together, and she said, it's nah. And then she stopped. And I said, you were going to say it's nasty, weren't you? And then she said, no, it's pretty good if you have it with lemonade or something. It's pretty good. And you are what you think. She was thinking that's nasty. And she stopped right at the word nah. We still in our family, we say that's nah now because it's just... Anyway, You are what you think. And this verse here that we're looking at, Romans 12:2, has a lot to do with our minds and what we think. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And in keeping with who I am, the question is how? How do you not be conformed to this world? How do you be transformed? How do you have your mind renewed? Okay, Jerry, see watch? Okay. The amazing thing with PowerPoint is that usually you control what's up there, but not at Creekside. I control this. Jerry sees my arm move. Jerry controls that, and he changes it. So it's like there's a wire, but it's an invisible wire in Jerry's eyesight. I'm going to focus today on not being conformed to this world. You know, this passage here, do not be conformed to this world, but rather be transformed through the renewal of your mind, assumes you're already saved. It's after salvation, Paul is saying that our minds need renewal, and that we need to not be conformed to this world in our minds. He's saying this after we're saved. It's kind of like this. You know, we're already saved, but we still need mind renewal. It's kind of like you are, say you're a terrible baseball player for the hated San Francisco Giants, right? You're over in evil San Francisco Giants land, and you're a terrible baseball player. And you get traded to the glorious, God-loving Oakland A's. You are saved from San Francisco and delivered into the glorious kingdom of the Athletics. But you're still a bad baseball player. You were saved, you play for the Oakland A's, and you still stink. So that's kind of what it's like. I don't say you all stink. You all seem to smell pretty good. But it's that when we're saved, we still need to have our minds renewed. That's what Paul is saying. I have a story about that. It's kind of like, the thing is about this, it's sort of like bad news. We are, when we're saved, we wish that then everything would go great. And that we were all correct, great, righteous, perfect. Well, in His sight we are, but we still are a terrible hitting, bad fielding baseball player. And we have to learn how to become a person who matches what, in our actions, matches what we are in our standing with God. We have to be a person who thinks rightly, therefore acts rightly, therefore is righteous, even though God already says you are righteous. So that's what this verse, I think, is getting at. I have a real short story about telling bad news. As an inspector, I work for the U.S. government. I'm a federal agent in the Environmental Protection Agency. It goes to sewage treatment plants and industries. And one time I went to Sturm Ruger that makes guns. Handguns. And at the end of it, I've been to hundreds of inspections, and at the end, if they do great, I tell them they do great. If they have things that need to be corrected, I'm the bearer of bad news, and I have to tell them the bad news. And at Sturm Ruger, they had to hear the bad news. And I was sitting across the desk from the president of Sturm Ruger, and I was saying, you know, I've given bad news often. But never before have I given bad news to somebody who has a handgun on his desk. He had a handgun. And then his next line was, and he pulled out his drawer and he says, and I got one here, and I got one here, and I got one here, and I got one here. And then he had all of his staff behind, and they said, and we got them too. And they were all holding up these guns. So as I'm bringing this particular thing that is actually sort of bad news, you're saved, but you still need mind renewal. If you put your guns away, I'd appreciate that. I'm just the one who's bringing the bad news. The question of how to be not conformed to this world, but be transformed to the renewal of your mind really comes down to how. How do you do that? And I think a really illuminating passage on how is this one in 2 Corinthians 10, 3-6. For though we walk in the flesh, this is Paul wrote this also, for For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. The background: our minds need renewal, to not be conformed to this world, but rather to be transformed. So I think that this verse is very illustrative of how you get there, how you get transformed, how you have your mind renewed. And I've entitled the presentation, this renewal actually involves a war. And I've entitled this presentation, The War, the Enemy, and the Battles. In this verse, the first word that I want to point out that just stands out like a sore thumb is the word war. War means that it's wartime. Paul's not writing just idle words. This passage, I believe, Paul believes, defines the reality of our lives as Christians. And that his word war means that we live in wartime. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe it. If you were in England during World War II and you were out in your yard and you were planting flowers and drinking teas and eating crumpets and talking in that voice that they talk in to each other, you can ignore that there's war, but that doesn't mean you don't live in wartime. The V-2 rockets are going to come. You're going to go into your shelter. All of those things are going to happen anyway. So the first thing about this, the reality is we live in wartime. That's what the word war means. War also means that there's an enemy. You can't have a war without an enemy. In this war that Paul's talking about, the enemy is the devil, Satan. And really it's a war that Satan's having against God. He's rebelling against God. He wants to rule. He wants to destroy God. He wants to thwart what God wants to do. He wants to take over. That's just what he wants to do. That's the war that's going on. And as C.S. Lewis has said in his books very beautifully, we live in rebel-held, Satan-held territory. This earth is rebel-held territory. He is the ruler of this world. It's still God's kingdom. It's actually God's earth, God's world, God's kingdom. But Satan's in rebellion, and he has, as a rebel, taken over this portion of the kingdom. We live in this rebel-held territory. And just to keep going with this analogy of war and wartime, there's an axis of evil. You know, in World War II, there was the Germans, there was the Italians, there was the Japanese, were all on the axis against the Allies. And eventually even the Soviet Russians started as axis and they went, anyway, there were a lot of countries. In this, there's actually kind of an axis as well. The real enemy is Satan, the devil. But he has some allies. His allies are the world, which we would mean the thinking that is here on earth. Cultures, family strife, whatever, the world. And also our flesh. Our desire to not follow God. So he has allies. There's Satan, the world, and the flesh. War also means, I think, that military thinking applies. We don't usually think in military terms about anything, because we live here. But if you live in wartime, you think in military terms. Military terms might be authority, obedience, victory, and honor. These are words that in the military they would clearly understand how great those things are. I'll give you an example of military thinking. Who was it that Jesus most praised of all the people he ran into when he was walking on earth? The centurion, the Roman centurion. He said, nowhere in all of Israel have I seen so much faith, to the centurion. He was so pleased with the centurion, who in the Old Testament is called a man after my own heart. King David, he was a warrior. I say that military terms of authority, obedience, victory, honor, these sorts of things apply if you're in wartime. And So that's what another point about what the word war implies. The next term that you see in it is our warfare. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. The great word there is our warfare. It isn't, we do not war according to the flesh, for the weapons of his warfare are not carnal. It's our warfare. And I think that word our is really an important word. It means that this war involves us, his children. It isn't just that Satan's rebelling against God and fighting against God. He's also fighting against us. And the reasons that he is that we are his children. It says in John 1:12-13, as many received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. That's us. We're born of God. We're his children. And the enemy wants to destroy his children as much as he wants to destroy God. We're also his kingdom. You know, wherever God is king is his kingdom. And when you accept Jesus, you say, you are my Savior and my Lord. You are my King. At that point, you are now in this rebel-held territory, a little piece of God's kingdom. And that's how his kingdom spreads. Each time somebody says that they accept Jesus, the kingdom spreads. The kingdom really is us. We're in his kingdom. Well, the enemy is warring against God and his kingdom. So we're involved again. That's why it might say our warfare. And we also have the purpose of spreading his kingdom. So we're taking God's purpose of making sure that this rebel-held territory is reconquered by God into his kingdom. And since that's our purpose, if you were the enemy, you would go after the ones who are going to try to reconquer that rebel-held territory. I'll say something about the enemy. Satan, he's not that strong. He's more like a terrorist. He actually cannot defeat God. He can't amass an army, beat God, take over the whole of creation. He can't even take over the whole of the earth in that way. He's more like a terrorist. He can only sideways, asymmetrically hurt God. He can hurt his children. He can destroy what God is trying to do. He can blow up bridges and hurt people. But he can't actually defeat God. The victory has already been won by Jesus on the cross. The victory is assured. But the enemy is a terrorist. We read a verse from 1 Peter 5:8 about him. Be sober, be watchful, for our adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. It doesn't say, be sober, be watchful. The enemy is amassing an army and is going to take over the world. It's going to take over creation. He says he's prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. He's like a terrorist. He's not an army. He's not that strong. But he is at war with us. And there's things about warfare. In warfare, there's no neutrality. You're either with God or you're with the enemy. Switzerland famously calls itself a neutral nation. And in World War II, they said they're neutral. Essentially what that meant was that if no one invades us, because we're Swiss, then we'll do commerce with anybody. We'll trade, we'll buy and sell weaponry, we'll sell grain and stock to anybody, any direction. We're neutral. Essentially, though, they were aiding the enemy. The Nazis were taking over all of Europe. Switzerland's trading with them for weapons and stuff. Even though Switzerland might be trading with Britain as well. There's no neutrality. You're on one side or the other. There's also no appeasement. You can't go to the enemy and say, if you would just wipe out Reed and Spiro, but keep me okay, then I will not make any waves with you. You just take care of them, but not me, okay? You cannot go to the enemy and negotiate. You cannot appease. Very famous appeasement moment was during World War II. Neville Chamberlain is the premier, I guess he's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of Great Britain. And Hitler from Germany is making rumbles about he wants to take all of German-speaking Europe and make all of German-speaking Europe German. And he says particularly this one part of Czechoslovakia, or old Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, is called the Sudetenland. That's a German-speaking portion of the Czech Republic. He said, all we want is the Sudetenland. All we want is reed and sparrow. That's all. At that point, then we will not fight anymore. Neville Chamberlain went and he negotiated that, and he said, I believe him. That was a big mistake. You cannot believe evil, for he's a liar. He negotiated with him. He came back after that, after this agreement that Germany would just take the Sudetenland and nothing else. He came back with an agreement, and he said, I believe we have achieved peace in our time. It's one of the most infamous wrong things ever said. Within about 2 months, Germany's rolling through Poland. In 4 months, Germany is coming into France. In 6 months, all the Allies are driven off of the European continent. Other countries are switching and becoming allied with Germany. All is left is England. Just like that, Neville Chamberlain thought he had brought peace in our time, but he was appeasing the enemy. The enemy cannot be appeased. Churchill, in his rebuke to Neville Chamberlain later, said these things: there's no greater mistake than to suppose platitudes, smooth words, and timid policies offer a path to safety. That's a man thinking in military terms. The next thing he says, an appeaser is one who feeds the crocodile, hoping it will eat him last. And then finally about Neville Chamberlain himself, he said, Chamberlain, he was given a choice between war and dishonor. He chose dishonor, and he will have war anyway. Warfare only ends when Satan is vanquished. It doesn't end when we say we're at peace with Satan. You can declare peace with the enemy, and he's still at war with you. You can appease Satan, and he's still at war with you. You can say you're neutral, and he's still at war with you. He's at war with you. That's the point. It's our warfare because he's at war with us. The next thing to point out from this scripture is that Paul uses these words, arguments, knowledge, thought. These are words that have to do with thinking, things in the mind. And this just means to me that this war or warfare is really in our minds. This whole verse is tilted toward what happens in our minds. So the battlefield, I believe, is in our minds. And that just rings true, does it not? Where are you fighting? Are you fighting Satan, battling him out, fist outside? Do you see him coming up and hitting him and fighting him? And it's all up in there. He's saying things to you, and you decide to follow or do what he says or go against God, and you are his agent now. The battle's all up in here. Paul uses words warfare and strongholds, and these are kind of picture words. You know, a stronghold is a fortress, a fort. And if it's in your mind, he's essentially kind of saying that your mind is like a country. The country of Gregistan, United States of Greg. That's the country. And that's what these words imply. He's picturing that a mind that is a country that is at war, essentially. Upon conversion, I switched sides. I was, before I was saved, I was in the world. The enemy could say anything. I would do whatever. I would listen, do whatever he says. Do what anyone says. Maybe I would reject or admit that something's right or wrong, but I didn't have any basis behind it. Before, I was just a country that the enemy the rebel had taken over as well. When I was saved, I switched allegiances. My flag used to be the flag of Greg, or maybe the flag of the enemy, but when I was saved, the flag now was God's flag. My country now had God's flag in the middle of it. I was at God's side now. I was at war with Satan now, the enemy, and it's wartime, and the battlefield's in my mind. And I think that that's what this verse is implying. Now I want to go to just dig into this a little bit more, what a stronghold is. What kinds of thinking is involved in what a stronghold would be? If this is the image is your mind is a country, a stronghold is an enemy-held fortress in your country. The enemy somehow or other has placed a fortress of his thinking in your mind, and that would be what would be called a stronghold. And the fact that Paul says that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. He uses the active words pulling down, means that these strongholds must exist. They're not just a figment that we're making up, some sort of thing that we're just, in theory, there might be strongholds of enemy thinking in your mind. There is strongholds of enemy thinking in your mind. It's really whatever enemy ways of thinking that you have internalized, I think you would call a stronghold. I found this picture of what a stronghold might look like. This is a computer game, and man, these pictures are awesome. This is, to me, is kind of what the stronghold might look like. It's foreign, it's in your land, it's been built up brick by brick. The enemy's army is behind that thing. You can't really see him or deal with him. He is in the middle of your country in a fortress. That's what a stronghold might be. I think he builds these things in a pretty systematic way. We go through something that is awful. Some pain, some abandonment, some issue of abuse, something goes wrong, some disappointment. We go through that, and then we start hearing Satan tell his lies. You know, the reason why you went through this is you're worthless. The reason why you went through this is nobody cares about you. The reason why this happened is God doesn't care. Actually, God is weak. He's powerless. He doesn't love you. These are things that the enemy starts saying. And as you internalize those enough, you end up with a fortress, a stronghold. That's the way you think. When you come into a battle, you think God's powerless. Nobody loves me. I'm going to defeat myself. This is the way you think. This is an internalized lie. And that's what this stronghold would be. Out of these, he can send out his attacks. I made a list. Actually, I didn't make this list by myself. I made this list with John Bruce, so it's an authorized list. It's what I would call internal enemy-held strongholds, alienation, and bitterness, being a victim all the time, self-defeating, fault-finding, self-justification, self-reference pride, everything has to do with me, worry, procrastination, stubbornness, self-deception, selfish pride, everything has to do with me because I'm so great. Everything has to do with me. Out of these sorts of internalized strongholds of thinking, the enemy can send out the way you think all the time. Send out his ways of thinking into any situation. Essentially, he can kind of take you over. And you know, sometimes these strongholds have been in you so long and so strong that they're not so much as an attack as an occupation of you. And here's what it might look like. If you were Paul's time, you were living in occupied Jerusalem. The Romans are walking around. You'd think it's normal that you see the Romans walking around. This is occupied Jerusalem. This is what a stronghold sends out, and it's been there so long you can't even tell. Paul would also, this is a great picture. This is a picture of a 1 to 50 scale model of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus, built by two Hebrew university professors in the 60s at the Holy Land Hotel in Jerusalem. It's an awesome thing. And as you can see, there's a picture of the temple right there in the middle, and the wall, the Wailing Wall is there. And then in the back there, it's the Antonia Fortress. The Romans built right up against the temple, their fortress, their stronghold, right in the heart, the center of Israel, in Jerusalem, not even just in Jerusalem, but right on the walls of the temple, the Romans built their fortress. And this is what it kind of looks like. This is what it looks like up close, brick by brick. The enemy builds into us, can put into us these little lies that he builds brick by brick so much that eventually his fortress is right next to your heart, right next to your being, your temple, who you are. As close as to you, it becomes you. He occupies your land, essentially, your nation. Sometimes he's been there so long and so strong, there's no sovereignty. You don't even have control of yourself. You're saved. You still have this fortress in you. I think two of the most powerful examples, well, here's a line about who it is that builds that fortress right next to your heart. It's the father of lies, Satan. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there's no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and a father of lies. Probably one of the strongest, I'm going to give two quick examples. The strongest internal enemy-held strongholds that I could think of is alienation. Out of being abandoned when you're little, or out of abandonment of some sort, comes the lie, nobody cares. Out of that comes the feeling of I'm worthless. Out of that comes the statement, I'm alone. I'm an alien. I'm alienated. I'm a rock. I'm an island. Out of that comes hostility to everybody else. A pride that is hostile. You say to yourself, I can only trust myself. You admire nobody. You follow nobody. You're very self-destructive. You're dead inside. This stronghold of alienation, when that painful thing of something like abandonment happens, the devil builds up that fortress right in your life. Another one is bitterness. Some abuse or something happens in your life and you get angry and aggrieved and enraged and you have wrath and you're critical, cynical to everybody. You have a vengeful heart. You become self-absorbed with your pain. You become unsatisfiable. You're angry toward anyone and everyone, critical in every direction. You become hollowed out. You become empty. And these are just two that I think are really powerful strongholds that the enemy builds. The next thing that he does besides strongholds is that he sends arguments and high things that exalt itself against the knowledge of God. High arguments and high things. It's just his ways of thinking that come from external. Culture, media, your brother-in-law, the world, external sources. And this picture is from also computer generated. They're awesome. This is what I think it looks like. An external enemy invasion might look like an armada coming across the water. Your country is who you are, and across the water from enemy-held territory is coming this armada. And I'll just move on from that. And if you don't resist it, eventually the enemy amasses an army in your country. And this maybe is what it looks like. Did you do it twice? No. Are we behind? This is the armada. Okay. And then one more. This is what the army might look like when it's amassed. If you don't resist the armada coming across the water, this is what the army might look like in your mind, ready to take over your country. And these sorts of enemy arguments might be lawlessness, equality of outcome. I got to get exactly what everyone else got. Psychology is a lot of good things in psychology, but also it can be a high argument against the knowledge of God. Evolution, collectivism is government solves everything. Individualism, I solve everything. Self-defeat is no one solves anything. Out of that really are the thoughts of powerless God and unloving God. Out of that comes, to make sense of the world, then comes that truth is relative, people are okay, what's truth, who's God, it doesn't, all of that sort of thinking comes. This is the culture we live in. The culture of there's many paths to God. Do your own thing. Out of that comes these sorts of worldviews. This is what I would say is an external enemy invasion. And you have to repel that. And then finally, in this passage, he says, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And I want to illustrate what this verse might mean. You have it? Yes, there you go. It's like an assassin in the land, an enemy assassin. The enemy is sending out from his strongholds or from his armada assassins that are going through your mind and every now and then saying things to just cause you to stumble. And whether he's successful or not is whether you repel it. It says, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Let me illustrate what that might be like. Read here. He's going to be Jesus, okay? Okay, so stand up. Would you be Jesus? Okay. Yeah, and Spiro? Yeah. You're the enemy. You're the thought, the evil thought. And you're the assassin. And you're this that says that you take every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ really is, I come and I find them. I grab them and I chain them to my arm, like with stocks. I don't talk to him. He's saying things to me like, you're worthless. You are a POS. You are, God doesn't love you. No one loves you. You deserve what happens to you. Those kinds of lies. He's saying that. I just chain him over here. I bring him to Jesus. I chain him to Jesus. And I say, tell that to the king. And I walk away. Taking every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. I think that's what that means. Finally, I'll say that God doesn't leave us with nothing. He gives us weapons to fight this warfare. We're going to talk about that next week. We won't do that now. I'll leave you with just this one thing. What we're to do, to sum up, we're at war. Really, the enemy's at war with you because you're God's. You're His child, and you have His purposes. The enemy's at war with you. And you can't negotiate or appease him. You can only defeat him. But you actually aren't strong enough to defeat him. You can only resist him, really. You resist, God defeats. This verse here in James, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. I think that's what I'll leave you with. For next week, the question is how? How do you resist the devil? We're going to, would you all pray with me for a second? My Lord Jesus, thank you for your word, for your goodness, your mercy. Especially, Lord Jesus, thank you for your strength, for bringing it to our minds that we are at war. That the reality is that we need you because we're being attacked. It isn't just us. It isn't because of our failings and our weakness. It's also because we have an active enemy who wants to fight us, Lord Jesus, who wants to destroy us. I thank you, Lord Jesus, that we are with you, the maker of heaven and earth, that you will destroy. Help us to resist, and we love you very much. In your name we pray. Amen. We're going to do something just a little different. We're going to end with a song. Go ahead.
Would you guys stand up with me? Just take a couple minutes to sing one more song. I wanted to show you guys this song because in some hard times in my life, this song has been so comforting to me. And so I wanted to show you how to sing it. Maybe it'll be in your head next time you have a hard time, battle to face. It's called The Lord Will Make a Way Somehow.
You have to do what we do.
You guys have just one simple part. Play me the chord. Okay. So let's get a groove going here first. Okay, now what you guys say. Okay, here's your part. You ready? He'll make a way. He'll make a way.
You can join us.
He'll make a way. He'll make a way. He'll make a way. If you're a girl, you can sing it higher. He'll make a way. He'll make a way. He'll make a way. Like a ship that's tossed and driven. He'll make a way. Battered by an wave. See, nice. He'll make a way. Sing loud with me. He'll make a way. He'll make a way. And the fury He'll make a way. Falls on me. He'll make a way. Well, I look and I wonder why. He'll make a way. Good things seem to pass me by. He'll make a way. But I say to my soul, don't worry. He'll make a way. You know the Lord will make a way somehow. Make a way. Sounds great. Keep going. Sing loud. You know the Lord will make a way somehow. He'll make a way. When he'll make a way. You bow. He'll make a way. brow.
He'll make a way.
There's a sweet
make a way.
reason nowhere.
Way.
That the Lord will make a way somehow.
He'll make a way. He'll make a way. He'll make a way.